Hello and welcome back to G Fun Facts Online. Today, we are going to tell a story about the end of the world, or at least, the end of a world. The year was 612 BCE. The place was Nineveh, the capital of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a city that was, at the time, the center of the universe. But on this specific day, the universe was burning. A massive coalition of Babylonians, Scythians, and Medes had finally breached the massive walls. They were there to erase the empire from history. They headed straight for the palace of King Ashurbanipal, a man who called himself the king of the world, and they set his royal library on fire. Now usually, when you burn a library, it is an act of total cultural annihilation. Think of the Library of Alexandria. But here is the paradox, and it is where our story truly begins. This act of destruction backfired beautifully. Ashurbanipal did not write on paper or parchment. He wrote on clay. When the palace burned, the fierce heat did not turn the books to ash. It baked them. It turned raw clay into ceramic. The fire that was meant to wipe out the knowledge of Mesopotamia actually preserved it, hardening the tablets against the rot of the next 2,500 years. But there was a heavy price to pay for this preservation. The library survived, but it did not survive intact. As the palace walls collapsed in the heat, the newly baked tablets were crushed. They were shattered and scattered across the floor. The Library of Ashurbanipal, the oldest surviving royal library in the world, became a debris field, millions of jagged fragments, a chaotic mixture of history, science, and literature. For the last 170 years, ever since British archaeologists first dug up these shards in the 1850s, scholars have been staring at a jigsaw puzzle from hell. They have sat in the back rooms of the British Museum and the Iraq Museum, sorting through crates of what looks like rubbish, trying to match a fragment the size of your thumb to another the size of your fist, hoping to reconstruct the great works of humanity. It has been a slow, agonizing, and often impossible task. Experts estimate that of the hundreds of thousands of cuneiform tablets discovered, 90% remain untranslated. But that is changing. In the last 5 years, a new kind of scribe has entered the room. It does not sleep, it does not strain its eyes, and it possesses a memory that spans every known fragment simultaneously. It is artificial intelligence. Today, we are diving deep into the dawn of computational epigraphy, the science of using algorithms to reassemble the shattered mind of Babylon. To really understand why this is such a big deal, we have to talk about why this puzzle is so hard. It is not just that the pieces are broken, it is the writing system itself. Cuneiform, invented by the Sumerians around 3400 BCE, is not an alphabet like we use today. It is a logosyllabic system, and quite frankly, it is a nightmare of complexity. A single wedge-shaped sign can represent a sound, a whole word, or even a category of words. Let me give you an example from the experts. There is a sign called KA. Depending entirely on the context, KA can mean mouth, tooth, word, speak, or shout. Now imagine reading a text full of those ambiguous symbols. Now imagine that text is written on a 3D clay object. Now imagine that object has been smashed into 20 pieces, and those pieces have been mixed into a pile with fragments from 10,000 other tablets. That is the reality of Assyriology. Enrique Jimenez, the professor of ancient Near Eastern literatures at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich, jokes that one day we will realize there was only one tablet at Nineveh, but it was broken into very, very small pieces. For decades, the only way to solve this was memory and luck. A scholar would read a fragment in London, memorize its shape and text, and then, maybe 20 years later, they would spot its matching piece in a drawer in Baghdad or Berlin. It was serendipity. The reconstruction of the Epic of Gilgamesh, our species' oldest great work of literature, has been a 150-year crawl, with new lines added only once every few decades. The sheer volume of data simply overwhelmed the human brain. There are approximately 30,000 tablets and fragments in the Ashurbanipal collection alone. No human can memorize them all, but a neural network can. This brings us to the breakthrough. The project is called the Fragmentarium, part of the Electronic Babylonian Literature project led by Professor Jimenez. The team realized something crucial. Computers often struggle with the nuance of translation, but they are absolutely incredible at pattern recognition. But first, they had to digitize the shards. And this is not as simple as taking a photo with an iPhone. Cuneiform is a 3D script. The meaning is in the depth and the angle of the wedges. A flat photo flattens the shadows and makes the text unreadable. So the team used advanced composite photography and algorithms that can infer depth from 2D images. They built a massive database of digital shards. Then, they unleashed the AI. The fascinating thing is how the AI reads. It ignores the meaning of the words. It does not care about poetry or kings. It looks at the sequence of the signs using a method called n-gram matching. In computational linguistics, An engram is just a contiguous sequence of items from a sample of text. The AI scans the transliterated signs of thousands of fragments, looking for overlapping sequences. If fragment A ends with a specific sequence of signs, and fragment B starts with a sequence that completes it, the AI calculates the probability that they are part of the same sentence. It does this millions of times a second, across thousands of fragments held in museums separated by continents. It acts like a superpowered visual matcher. It does not just look for text, it looks for the unique geometry of the break. It can predict that a specific jagged edge in the British Museum fits perfectly into a void on a tablet in the Yale Babylonian collection. The results were immediate and staggering. Starting around 2018, the system began spitting out joins, that is the technical term for matches between fragments, at a rate that no human could ever hope to match. It identified hundreds of new manuscripts and filled in thousands of missing lines in the corpus of Babylonian literature. But its greatest triumph, arguably, was the resurrection of a city. For 2,000 years, a specific text called the Hymn to Babylon was a ghost. Scholars knew it existed because it was referenced in other texts. But the work itself was considered lost, scattered into the dust of history. In 2024, the Fragmentarium changed that. The AI identified a connection between a fragment in the British Museum and several others in Baghdad. When the scholars verified the match, they realized they were not just looking at a dry administrative text or a receipt for sheep. They were looking at a masterpiece. The Hymn to Babylon is a 250-line poetic composition, and what it reveals changes our understanding of the ancient world. It offers a heartbreakingly beautiful glimpse into the civic soul of the metropolis. This is not a prayer to a distant god, it is a love letter to a city. We often grow up with the biblical image of the whore of Babylon, a place of sin and corruption, but the text reconstructed by the AI paints a completely different picture. It describes Babylon as a vibrant, gem-like center of civilization. The hymn calls the city a mountain of lapis lazuli, glittering in the sun. It speaks of the Euphrates River, but not just as a water source. It describes the river as the bringer of the harvest, describing in rare detail how the river swells in spring to fertilize the fields. This focus on nature is incredibly rare in Mesopotamian literature, which usually focuses on the mighty deeds of kings and the wrath of gods. The hymn describes burgeoning meadows and orchards heavy with fruit. It reveals a people who were deeply in tune with the ecological rhythms of their delta home. But perhaps the most surprising revelation from this AI reconstructed text is about the women of Babylon. The hymn contains specific stanzas dedicated to the priestesses of the city. It lists them by title, the Ubbakatu, the Nadatu, and the Kustatu. It describes them with a reverence that challenges a lot of our modern assumptions about ancient patriarchy. These women are praised for their devotion and discretion. They are recognized as the pillars of the city's spiritual health. Through this text, we can see them moving through the massive temple of Esagil, not as shadows, but as essential guardians of the sacred rites, their songs mixing with the noise of the streets. And speaking of the streets, there is a stanza in the Hymn to Babylon that resonates powerfully with our modern world. It praises the city's cosmopolitanism. The hymn asserts that Babylon is a sanctuary where foreigners are respected. It describes a city of diverse tongues and peoples, held together by the protection of the vulnerable. This directly contradicts the narrative of Babylon as a place of oppression. To its citizens, Babylon was a bastion of order and justice, a cosmic city where the laws protected the orphan and the widow, and where even the outsider could find a home. This is the power of computational epigraphy. It is not just giving us words, it is giving us the soul of a civilization. And the Fragmentarium has not stopped at Babylon. It has turned its gaze to the big one, the Epic of Gilgamesh. As I mentioned, this epic tells the story of a king's futile quest for immortality. It is the backbone of ancient literature. But for a century, the text has been full of lacunae, which is the fancy word for gaps. Holes where the clay is broken, leaving the reader to guess what happens next. Using the AI, Professor Jimenez's team has filled in dozens of these gaps. One newly discovered fragment adds a scene that is surprisingly comedic and human. It takes place while Gilgamesh and his wild companion Enkidu are traveling to the cedar forest to fight a monster. In the previous versions we had, they were simply described as anxious. But in the restored text, we see them bickering like an old married couple. We see Enkidu trying to talk Gilgamesh out of the dangerous mission, and we see Gilgamesh nervously cracking jokes to hide his own fear. It is a small detail, but it changes everything. It makes these mythic heroes feel less like statues and more like real men. Beyond the epics, the AI is revolutionizing our understanding of daily life. It is reassembling medical texts, revealing complex treatments for ailments ranging from depression to kidney stones. It is piecing together omen lists. These might sound superstitious to us, but they serve as a psychological map of the Babylonian mind. They show us what they feared, like eclipses and malformed births, and what they hoped for. The AI has even touched the Al-Yahudu tablets. This is a collection of texts that document the lives of Judean exiles in Babylon. These texts are now clearer than ever, and they confirm that the Babylonian captivity was not exactly a period of dungeon imprisonment. The exiles were entrepreneurs. They were traders. They were royal officials. They signed contracts, they bought land, and they integrated into the economy. It aligns perfectly with the advice the prophet Jeremiah gave them in the Bible to build houses and settle down. Now, I want to talk about what I think is the most radical aspect of the Fragmentarium. It is not the technology itself, it is the philosophy of access. In the past, Cuneiform tablets were the jealously guarded domain of a few elite professors. If you wanted to see a text, you had to fly to London, get special permission, and sit in a dusty room with white gloves. The Electronic Babylonian Literature Project has blown the doors off that ivory tower. They have placed the reconstructed texts online. It is open access. Anyone, from a high school student in Ohio to a history buff in Osaka, can log in. You can browse the Epic of Gilgamesh, click on a line, and see the photograph of the original clay fragment that contains it. You can see exactly where the AI has made a join and read the translation yourself. This is the democratization of Assyriology. It invites the world to participate in the reconstruction of human history. There are still thousands of unidentified fragments in the database. It is entirely possible that a curious amateur, playing with the tool from their living room, could spot a connection that an algorithm missed. You could identify a lost line of poetry from 3,000 years ago. So what does this all mean? The Babylonians were obsessed with immortality. It is the central theme of their literature. Gilgamesh sought it in a magical plant. The kings sought it in stone monuments and massive palaces. And in a way, they failed. The plant was eaten by a snake. The monuments crumbled into sand. The palaces were burned. But they also sought immortality in a third way. They sought it in writing. The scribes of Nineveh and Babylon had a saying, "The scribe is the one who lives forever." They believed that their words could outlast the clay they were pressed into. For 2,000 years, that faith seemed misplaced. Their libraries were burned, their language was forgotten, and their culture was buried. But today, through the marriage of silicon chips and clay shards, they are speaking again. Computational epigraphy is doing more than just solving a puzzle. It is proving the scribes right. The fire that destroyed their city could not silence them. The breaking of the tablets only made the puzzle harder, not impossible. And as the AI scans the shattered remnants of the first great civilization, we are finding that the people of Babylon, with their love of nature, their bustling streets, their fear of death, and their pride in their city, are not so different from us. The shattered library is reassembling itself, and this time it is digital, it is decentralized, and it is indestructible. Babylon has risen. Thank you for listening to G Fun Facts Online.